True story. At the 4 o'clock service, when you preach enough, you kind of have an idea of how long you're going to preach. And I had this, maybe 11, 12-minute sermon that I was going to give. And I kid you not, my voice just stopped at 7 minutes. So I took that as a sign from God that you get the 7-minute version of that sermon. Getting over allergies and whatever's in the air, my voice was fine the rest of the service, but God really did not like the last 5 minutes of that sermon. So you get 7 because I was trying to listen as best I could. But what I wanted to talk about in this story, there's so many great parts of the Christmas story that you can touch on, and we can do 100 sermons on it and still not run out of material. But I wanted to talk about interruptions. Every part of this story comes from an interruption, right? Mary had a plan for her life. Now, I imagine all of you, plan for life, right? If you have children, you got to plan. If you have just things in life, you plan. This month, you probably were over-planned, right? December, we are fully committed with parties and different things we do. So there was probably a lot of planning in December, gift giving, all those things, right? You're either a planner or you're like me, you're married to someone who plans, so you don't have to worry about it. Well, one of those two things is true, though, and that's not unusual. Life requires planning, requires an idea of what we're going to do, and Mary and Joseph were no different. They were two people who had plans, right? Mary had a plan. They were engaged. They had a plan for a wedding. They had a plan for life. They had a plan for where they were going to live. They probably thought about what their family was going to look like. They had plans. And their plan got interrupted. God interrupted it. And so Mary was pregnant by the Holy Spirit, and they had to change plans. And they probably had a plan for what the birth of that child was going to be like. They were in Nazareth. That's Mary's hometown. And so they probably thought they were going to give birth in Nazareth and Mary's hometown, around Mary's mother and maybe siblings, her sisters. That was a plan. But they got interrupted by a government census. Nothing's worse than when the government interrupts your plans, right? It happens. And so they got interrupted, and they had to change plans. So they Joseph decides to bring Mary, and they go to Bethlehem, where he's from, to go for the census. And nobody would plan that. I've not met one pregnant woman, including my wife when she was pregnant, but many others in my family that I've known and been priests for, that has been about 8 months pregnant and said, let's plan on a donkey ride. Sounds amazing. Let's go. Let's do about a week-long donkey ride from here to there. It sounds great. And then when we get there, the place I want to get to is with your in-laws. That sounds wonderful, right? Nobody's ever planned that at 8 months pregnant. That wasn't Mary's plan. Her plan got interrupted. She ends up giving birth in Bethlehem as it was foretold. It wasn't a prophecy that they sought to fulfill. It was a prophecy that God fulfilled by interruptions. And in Bethlehem, she gives birth. And Mary and Joseph maybe want to savor that moment. I don't know, if you all remember moments, those of you who have had children, you remember kind of that moment where you first saw the child and that first night, and it was a mix of joy and fatigue and exhaustion and all of it. And maybe the two of them just wanted to have a night to take it all in. And a knock on the door. It's a bunch of shepherds who were coming to interrupt their night because God interrupted it. He invited them. They didn't invite them. Who would invite shepherds to come hang out with you on your first night of being parents? No one. But God did, right? An interruption. Everything in the story, and if we were to keep going in the story, right? The life of Mary and Joseph and Jesus, we see interruption after interruption after interruption that disrupts where they live, disrupts where they raise Jesus. All these things, interruption after interruption after interruption in their plans. And so here's what I want to leave us with on this theme. All of us make plans. All of us get our plans interrupted, and we have to change plans. Now, not every time we change plans and get interrupted, it's God. But sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Because sometimes our plans, we get so set on our plans that we miss his. And so he has to interrupt us. And oftentimes, interruptions are frustrating and annoying and things we don't want. But when they're from him, they set us in a different direction. God had a big plan, right? He wanted his son to be in the world to show us a different way, to show us love, to show us compassion, to show us mercy in a world full of anger and hatred and hard-heartedness. He had a different plan. But to bring his plan to life, he had to interrupt a lot of Mary and Joseph's plans. So God has a plan for each of your lives, each of your families. And sometimes to bring it to be, he's got to interrupt some of our plans. So I would encourage you in the coming year to maybe think differently about interruptions. And not every interruption is a holy interruption, but some of them are. And so to think about Mary and Joseph and all the interruptions they faced that came from God to redirect their plans so that they could be part of his big plan. And maybe the interruptions we might be experiencing at some time in our life might be for the same reason. So I don't have when this happens, you know it's God formula for you. But I want to encourage you to think about interruptions in your plans. And for a moment, maybe when they happen, consider, is this God redirecting me to be part of his plan? Is this God changing my direction to be part of what he is doing? It's worth giving pause to give that thought, because that's the way he worked constantly in the life of Mary and Joseph. One interruption after another to redirect them to his plans. And maybe that's the way he works in our life too. So give pause when we're interrupted to see maybe it's God redirecting us to be part of his plans instead of just settling for ours. In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.